Welcome to part 2 of the lectures on the behaviorist approach or the social learning approach. By the way, I think that the sound cut out at the very end of the last mini lecture, so I'll just say that again. What I was arguing was that a lot of stand-up comedians have said in interviews that when they were younger they were bullied, they didn't really fit in, and so they used humor as a way to avoid bullying or to become popular in school. And so that's what formed their personality of having a good sense of humor, is because of their past experiences. Okay, so the focus of part 2 here in the mini lectures is the social learning approach to personality, and we're going to focus on two theorists, Albert Bandura and Julian Rotter. Okay, so let's start with what is social learning. Before, we said that through classical and operant conditioning, our personality might be shaped by how we have experienced our environment ourselves in the past. So what previous behaviors that we did led to rewards versus punishments. But the social learning approach adds to that by saying we are smart. We can assume that if we observe someone else doing something that leads to a reward, we might want to do that same behavior, assuming that we would also get that same reward. Alternatively, of course, if we see someone do a behavior and get punished, we are less likely to do that behavior because we assume we might also get that punishment. So this is the social learning addition to classical and operant conditioning that we learn by observing other people and seeing their rewards and punishments. That's sometimes called vicarious learning. So Bandura became famous because in the 60s, he did a series of studies on whether our personality can be changed through watching other people on television. And the reason that this was famous at the time is because in the 60s was when a lot of personal families owned televisions for the first time. Up until that, televisions were really too expensive. So basically, this was the first time that a lot of people were watching TV, their kids were watching TV, and there were social concerns about kids watching TV aggression and whether that would make their kids aggressive themselves. So he set up a series of studies on that topic that we call the Bobo doll studies now. So if you aren't familiar with these studies, a Bobo doll is this inflatable clown that you can see on the slide. And the reason it's called a Bobo doll is because that was the name of the clown. It was Bobo the clown. So he wanted to know, if we have a kid watch aggression on television, will that affect the child's personality and make the child more aggressive? So he brings in 4-year-old kids one at a time, and he has them watch aggression on television. What they see is a short clip of an adult behaving aggressively toward this Bobo doll. So they pretty much just wail on this Bobo doll. They punch it in the face, they kick it, they pick it up and throw it across the room, and they also pick up a plastic hammer and smack the Bobo doll in the face with the plastic hammer. So there are 4 specific behaviors that the adults enact that are aggressive, and each behavior is accompanied by a verbalization of aggression, like pow, right in the nose, boom, boom. So each kid watches this video of aggression, and Bandura wants to know, are they going to model that aggression? Well, it's a little bit more complicated than just watching and doing. So he also does some manipulation of 3 independent variables. He's interested in whether the adult is male or female, if that will influence the child's behavior. So half of the kids see an adult male in the video, half of the kids see an adult female in the video. They do the exact same behaviors. Another independent variable is whether the child is male or female. He wants to know if that will make a difference. And the third independent variable is the end of the film. So all of the kids see the adults behaving aggressively. A third of the children are in the control group. In that group, the film just ends as soon as the aggression ends. A third of the children see a reward condition or a reinforcement condition. So in that condition, the adult acts aggressively, and then a second adult enters the room, smiles and praises the first adult so this verbal praise, calls them a strong champion. Good job, you're a strong champion, and gives them pop and candy as a reward. The last third of the children see the punishment condition. So this one's a little bit weird by today's standards, but the first adult acts aggressively, a second adult enters the room, has a frowny face, says, "You're mean, you picked on that clown, stop picking on that clown," and then kind of awkwardly spanks the first adult. So a little bit weird, but if you're a 4-year-old kid, you don't make it super weird. So it's either control condition, reward condition, or punishment condition. All right, so here are some photos of the actual original film that the kids saw. You can see here a woman is sitting on the Bobo doll and I'm punching it in the face. Here you can see she's picking it up and throwing it across the room. And here you can see that she's holding this plastic hammer and she's smacking the Bobo doll with the plastic hammer. So the kids all see the video. They have 3 different endings. What's the dependent variable? So now the hypothesis is that the kids might have changed their own aggressive tendencies. So they see the video, then they're brought into a different room, which is the room that they saw in the video. And this room has a bunch of toys, and Bandura says, "You can play with any of these toys you want. I have to do some paperwork for a couple of minutes." So the kid gets total freedom to do whatever they want. And Bandura wants to know, are they going to basically show the same behaviors that they saw in the video? Now, the dependent variable was observed by 2 experimenters who were watching them through a one-way mirror. Each of those experimenters coded the child's aggressive behaviors, and then the codings were correlated later, and they agreed with each other pretty high, so 0.89% correlation between the 2 coders. So the idea was that there was pretty good reliability of did the kids actually act aggressively or not. Okay, so what were the results? First of all, we see a main effect where boys were more aggressive than girls in general, regardless of the other 2 conditions. And that was what Bandura expected. The second is that, again, as Bandura expected, aggression went up more when the children saw an adult who was the same sex as themselves. So if a girl sees a woman acting aggressively, she's more likely to act aggressively herself because, according to Bandura, you see a similar model, and that makes you think it's okay that I do these behaviors, and it also makes you more likely to think I might actually get the same consequences too. A little boy is going to be more aggressive if he sees the video of a man being aggressive. Okay, then the third condition, of course, was really important here, the third independent variable, which was that regardless of the sex of the child or the sex of the model, aggression is the highest when the children saw the adult be rewarded for their aggression. So they get the verbal praise and the pop and candy, presumably because the child thinks, I might get that same reward. That's the vicarious learning, the social learning. I am going to learn to do behaviors because I've seen someone else be rewarded for them. And the kids showed the exact same behaviors and verbalizations that they had seen in the video. So Bandura's argument is, through social learning, our personalities are shaped by observing what other people do and copying them if those behaviors have been rewarded. Here are some pictures of the original study of little kids beating up the Bobo doll. So here a little boy is picking it up to throw it across the room. Here he's smacking it in the face with a hammer. Here a little girl is sitting on it and smacking it in the face. And here she's wailing on the Bobo doll. She's also holding the hammer. Okay, our second important theorist who comes from a social learning approach is Rotter. So Rotter said he defines personality as how likely you are to act in a certain way. So what is your behavior potential? So some of us are more likely to respond in some ways compared to others. And for him, that's what personality is all about. So a specific example of this is, let's say you go to a party, someone insults you. How likely are you to respond with the need for revenge? I need to insult them back. How likely are you to sort of apologize and say, oh, sorry, my bad? How likely are you to simply walk away? And we all have different likelihood expectations, and that's what our personality becomes for Rotter. Okay, so he has this equation, VP equals E plus RV. So what does that mean? BP is your behavior potential. How likely are you to do certain behaviors? So how likely are you to demand revenge from this person who insulted you versus how likely are you to apologize and sort of become submissive? So BP is how likely are you to do certain actions. E is your expectancy. For Rotter, your expectancy is your mental calculation of how probable is a consequence if I enact a certain behavior. So if I demand that the person apologize to me for insulting me, what is the likely consequence? What is probably going to happen? Will that person apologize? Will they want to get in a fight with me? So it's the expected consequence of any given behavior. I have an example of this on the next slide. The last part of the equation is RV, or the reinforcement value. This is the degree to which you really want a certain outcome to occur. How much do you value that outcome? How much do you think that consequence would be totally, totally awesome versus if I do X and I get Y response, I don't really care about that response. So even though it might be likely to happen, it doesn't really motivate me because I don't really care about that. So let's go through an example of this. Imagine again, you're at this party, someone insults you. Okay, so this is a table from a different textbook. It's not in your textbook, but it shows the sort of examples falling out here. Okay, so you have several options. Someone insults you. You can ask them to apologize. You can insult them back. You could just yell at them. You could leave the party. These are your various options. Okay, so you think about these options in your head, and then you think, what would be the possible outcome? Let's say I ask for an apology and they apologize. Okay, how likely is that to happen? The expectancy column here is how likely is that to actually occur? We live in a normal society, we have expected rules, so you might think if someone insults me and I ask them politely for an apology, that's pretty likely to happen. So we have a high expectancy. The value is, do I want that to happen? So that seems like a really nice solution to this problem. I've shown sort of maturity and grace. I've received a public apology. That sounds good. So I have a high value associated with that. That leads to being a high behavior potential. I think that the likelihood that this is going to happen is high, and I think that this would be a valued outcome. So in this scenario, my asking the person to simply apologize becomes my highest behavior potential. It's the most likely thing that I'm actually going to do. The other three things all become less likely because either I have a low expectancy or a low value. So let's say someone insults me and I insult them right back. I come up with a zinger like, yeah, so is your mom, right? Okay, so the possible outcome is the whole party laughs at how witty and amazing I am, right? That would have a high value. I would love that, but the expectancy might be low. So while you're sitting there calculating, boy, wouldn't it be great if I came up with a zinger? Like time is passing and now it becomes awkward for me to come up with it. I might not be able to come up with something on the fly, right? We've all had this experience where like later you think, oh man, I wish I had said that. That would have been amazing, but it didn't occur to you at the time, right? So the expectancy that you're going to be able to come up with something that quickly is low, even though the value of that happening would be wonderful. This becomes a less likely outcome. Similarly, you might just leave the party. That seems like an average expectancy. Like, yeah, that's probably a likely thing to happen, but I wouldn't value that. I would feel like I've left the party shamed, basically. So I wouldn't do that either, right? So you calculate this ratio of what's the likely outcome, do I value that outcome, and the best possible combination leads to your behavior potential. Okay, so a little bit more detail on this. The reinforcement value, remember going back to this table, the value is how much do I want that outcome? How much would I value that? So part of your personality is which possible outcome do you prefer? And this changes based on our needs at the time. So if we're lonely, for example, we're going to value outcomes more if they lead to social interactions, social rewards, social status. So Rotter said your personality could be assessed by which of these things do you value the most. If you're the type of person who really needs social reinforcement, social validation, that could be part of your personality, is that you really need that sort of social acceptance. It's kind of like an extroversion type of trait. Alternatively, expectancy, remember going back to this column, expectancy is how likely do you think that that outcome really is. So expectancy, he says, is based on, did you try that in the past and did it lead to the outcome that you think is going to happen, right? So if you've tried this in the past, if you've come up with quick, witty zingers really quickly, and you know that you're likely to be able to do that again, then your expectancy becomes higher. Part of Rotter's theory was what he called locus of control. This is a personality trait that a lot of other people have used in other perspectives, but it comes from Rotter. Rotter is the person who came up with the idea of locus of control and created a scale to measure it. So locus of control is the idea that you either believe that you are in control of your fate and your future, that's an internal locus of control, or if you have an external locus of control, you believe that your fate, your future is not up to you. It's up to a higher power, it's up to destiny, it's up to luck, right? Or some powerful other human like your boss or your parents have total control over you. So this becomes the idea of, are you motivated to kind of take control of your life? Because if you believe that you have that capability, you have an internal locus of control, you might work harder. If you believe that you're in control of your grades and whether you get the job that you want and whether you get the internship that you want, you're going to potentially work harder. If you have an external locus of control and you feel like, nah, it's not really up to me, then you might give up sooner. So the personality test that I've given you on Canvas for this unit is the actual scale that Rotter wrote and created back in 1966 on locus of control. So you can go ahead and take that test and see what your score is. It's a short test, it's only 8 items. And I'll just summarize for you some of the research on what locus of control means in terms of our lives. So in general, internal locus of control has been found to be sort of the better way to think about your life. It's associated with less conformity, greater belief in yourself. That's the perceived competence. Sometimes we call that self-efficacy. Do you believe that you're capable of achieving things that you want to try? You're in more control of your physical health. You have better positive attitudes about exercise and not smoking and diet. It leads to higher achievement in school and happiness in general. And the idea is you kind of take responsibility for your life. You say, you know what, if something's not going well, it's up to me to fix it. So you take control over yourself. You empower yourself to be in charge of your life. And that's an important personality distinction that Rotter really thought was interesting. Okay, that's it for lecture 2. 1 to go.